Okay, this just came out 3 hours ago, addressing the biggest obstacles to belief with Trent Horn, Council Trent. So I haven't listened to this. We're going to listen to this. I'll accept calls in from theists. They get preferred treatment. Most people on the planet believe in some type of higher power, some type of deity. So it's obvious to me that this is, I think, just for atheists. But maybe what this is really talking about is believing in the wrong God? I don't know. Why is my door open? I thought I closed it. Ooh, Jesus, come in. Get a chair. Where's my chair? I had a chair for Jesus. Oh, it's over there. Jesus is always welcome to join my program at any time. I have a chair, a throne, a seat for him, and we can talk. Man to man. Jesus is a man, right? 100% man. I'm also, see, this is what Jesus and I have in common. He's 100% man. I'm 100% man. What we don't have in common is he's dead. I'm alive. Okay, let's listen.
How I want to kind of frame this conversation up, there's a quote by David Foster Wallace that is part of a commencement speech that he gave now almost 20 years ago. Here's what he had to say. There's no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only thing we get to choose is what to worship. If you worship money and things, then you will never have enough. Worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when the time and age starts showing, you will die 1,000,000 deaths before they finally plant you. Worship power, you will feel weak and afraid. You will need ever more power over others to keep the fear at bay.
Okay, I got to say this. There's atheists who are triggered by this. It doesn't trigger me at all. I'm more dead inside than a lot of atheists. No, we don't worship. Well, strictly based on the definition of worship, if the definition of worship is entails a deity and you truly, truly don't believe any deity exists, then yes, you atheists, you're correct. You cannot worship because you don't. How can you worship something that doesn't exist, that you believe that doesn't exist? But if you take that more of a lax definition of worship, that there's something very important to you in your life, let the theists have it. Let's say, yeah, I do worship things. Let them have it. It's okay.
A. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, and you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out, and so on. That distinction between intentional worshipers and unintentional worshipers is fascinating to me. I'm talking too much. I want to turn this over to you and get some of your thoughts about this quotation.
Yeah, I mean, worship just means to give something its worthship, to give it its value. And our Lord Jesus Christ even said that where your treasure is, there also your heart will be. So people, even if they aren't Christian, even if they aren't religious, there are things that they're going to deeply value, whether it's themselves, whether it's certain ethical principles. But ultimately, as human beings, as Saint Augustine,
I would make the comment that even Christians, in a way, worship themselves. They value themselves greatly. They value their own eternal life, and that's why they freely choose the gift of salvation given by Jesus Christ their Lord, because they know to reject that gift has dire consequences. So they value their own eternal life and their life here on earth so greatly that they're willing to give it all to Jesus. See what I did there? Yeah, it's putting pressure on that whole idea that you've become the God of your own life. Christians are the God of their own life. If you're a non-Calvinist, you are the God of your own life, choosing your free will to follow Jesus. You've become the God of your life to submit to Jesus. Whereas the Calvinists would say, oh, you're determined to, so don't take credit for that either.
said, we were made with a God-shaped hole in our hearts, and that when we try to fill that with other things of this life, it's ultimately not satisfying, or at least it leaves us bereft or short of our true ends that we were made for. So it's interesting that a lot of people say, oh, well, we have technology now, we have scientific advancement, things are so great, we don't need religion. And yet we have an epidemic of loneliness, of deaths of despair that we've never seen before, because even though we have...
Not sure about that if we've never seen before. I'm sure there's a lot of despair, I don't know, during World War One, World War Two, the Cold War, Civil War. I mean, is there a despair meter gauge that we can go back in history to compare? I don't think so. But I do agree with the sentiment that Trent's saying, that a lot of young people, a lot of people in general, I guess suicides are up for certain demographics, right? So that's a good indicator. And that reminded me of, I did listen to this part, and that reminded me of this. This is Peter Boghossian, Street Epistemology. This guy is some type of Christian. Listen to what he has to say.
Christian existentialist.
You're a Christian existentialist. Okay.
Or existentialist Christian.
Okay, so, and you believe morality...
And a pragmatist, so I think Christianity works better. Christianity has better outcomes
than
the alternatives.
All of them?
No, most of them. I think that there's a small number of people that can handle atheism, and I know all of you.
Does he know me?
And I'm friends with all of them.
I actually agree with that sentiment. There's a small number of people who can handle atheism. I think there's some truth in the New Testament when it says it's easier for rich man to go through the eye of the needle. Easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than a rich man. It's making a comment that in order to be more open to Christianity, you have to be a little bit desperate. You have to have a need. Rich people don't have that many needs, at least physical needs, right? I think everybody can agree with that. I have a very wealthy friend, and he said we were talking about a problem in his life. And it was easily fixed with money. And he said, you know, that's one good thing about being rich. If I was poor, I would be emotionally unstable right now. I'd be anxious. I mean, but because I have the money to write a check for X amount, it's like I can let this slide. Poor people can't do that. Poor people, this is why a lot of atheists are big on a social safety net. When Mr. Deity was on with me, he basically admitted that there's no backstop if you're not a Christian. See, if you're a Christian and you believe that God interacts with his creation, and if you believe all things work out for good for those who love Christ, if you believe God provides, that's your backstop. Even though it's not real, mentally it gives you a sense of calmness. If you truly don't believe any gods exist, nobody's going to bail you out from cancer or no money, whatever. What's next? You need the government or at least society to bail you out when you get in trouble. And that's why a lot of atheists are pro bigger government and so forth. So if you're going to be an atheist, be financially independent, be a little more dead inside, be okay with non-existence, take active steps to find hope, meaning, and purpose in other areas of your life. But if you're any way unstable emotionally, if you're poor and you're reliant on others to get through the day, financially, emotionally, you're better off staying a Christian or a Muslim or whatever. You probably need it. You probably should just click off right now from this channel.
Yeah.
But no, I think that, and you know, like Suf.
Okay, let's get back to
technology that can do so many things for us, and that's great. It ultimately can't help us understand the most basic questions of life. Who am I? What am I? What is my purpose? Why am I here? What ought I to do? And the Christian worldview is the only sufficient means of answering those questions in accord with our human nature and our human experience.
So one thing that I think is interesting, though, is that there are some a priori beliefs that people have which, once believed, make Christianity unbelievable. And the most dramatic example of that I can think about would be sort of this materialist worldview where someone is very convinced that there isn't anything other than matter, that even a human, the thing that we call consciousness, is really just chemicals in the brain. I'm so interested, as I'm kind of doing this project on this YouTube channel, I'm so interested in what are these sort of competing bedrock beliefs that people have where once you've bought into that system of thought or way.
I got to pause here because I'm also, see, I can do more. I can do two things at once, even more. Philaminus asks, Doug, you always tell us to be dead inside, but you never tell us how to be dead. That's not true. I've told people how to become more dead inside. It's a skill that can be learned. The way you do it is find things that trigger you the most, have a friend sit down, even a friend who disagrees with you, and so they're not lying, not role-playing. And what really bothers you the most, have them say it over and over to you again until your response is zero and you're dead inside, you're numb to it. That's how you do it. Cognitive coaching. A lot of psychologists might be cringing right now, but I bet you they admit it will work. But then they would say, but you ought not be numb inside.
Of viewing the world, then as you look out through it, the Christian message, the idea of God, the idea of a resurrection just seem absolutely absurd to you.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think that when people have these mistaken worldviews, it's helpful to take them to their logical conclusions and to show that they actually contradict their other basic worldviews that they have. So you start with the example that you gave that, well, the world is just material. If someone held to a kind of eliminative materialism, to say that the only things that exist are material objects governed by the laws of physics. And so those objects are determined by the laws of physics and the conditions of the universe going all the way back to the Big Bang. Well, that's going to conflict with other deeply held intuitions and beliefs people have, especially in the moral realm. For example, the idea that I am responsible for my actions. I can be praised or blamed for the actions that I take. That's really incompatible with my act.
Yeah, I respectfully disagree with that because we humans are not omniscient. We don't know all the causes and effects, but we do know historically, looking in the past, that certain words said does affect people in certain ways. Certain actions done does affect certain outcomes. And so even if everything is determined, we ought to still praise, shame, incarcerate, all these things, because we know those causes have effects. And by the way, the answer I just gave about how you can live in a materialistic world and still have moral accountability is the exact type of answer a Calvinist would give, who are believers, who are determinists. But maybe Trent Horn would give the same complaint to Calvinists that he's giving to materialists. I don't know.
Actions being determined. We don't praise or blame lightning bolts or tigers or E. coli bacteria for the harms that they cause because they're determined by physical factors. And yet we understand that humans...
But even other animals in the animal kingdom, they have a sort of blame, shame, praise, cause and effect within their own tribes to change outcomes.
It's a moral responsibility. We understand that they have moral dignity, for example. They have this intrinsic dignity and worth where they should be seen as ends and not merely as means. But I would say that that is incompatible with the materialist worldview. And so if you're more confident of the moral worldview, then you should question the merely materialist worldview that you have around. And also the material worldview, it's...
Yeah, when it comes to intrinsic worth, I think many theists believe that that can only come from a God. And so if you don't believe in a God, then there's no intrinsic worth. I'm willing to grant that to you. I have no intrinsic worth, if that's how you define intrinsic worth. But what does that matter? Do you think people are more likely to kill me now? No. I don't think so. What makes it more likely that someone will kill me is if I get involved in certain crime scenes and the drug industry, or I kill somebody else and they want revenge. That's what's going to increase the likelihood that I'm going to be killed or devalued a lot. If I take steps in my life where society devalues me so much that certain individuals within that society will kill me because I have no intrinsic worth, yeah. But be a good, productive citizen, and that won't happen. Usually. Accidents do happen.
A lot of metaphysical elements to it. Just to say, even if the world around us were simply material objects, that doesn't explain why they exist instead of not existing.
Yeah, again, this is any argument like this you can just apply to God. Why does God exist as opposed to not exist? What answer would Trent give? Because he just is. He's the Alpha and the Omega. He's the beginning, he's the end. You don't ask why God exists. He's a necessary being. And guess what? I can say the same thing. You don't ask why the universe exists. It's a necessary entity.
It doesn't explain how they came into existence in the finite past. It doesn't explain these material objects. How do they change over time? They go from potential to actual. Something has to actualize them. But that chain of actualization couldn't be infinite in and of itself. So a lot of times these world...
Yeah, and God is infinite, eternal past, right? Why can't the cosmos be eternal past? The only difference is one has a disembodied brain, mind, and my brute fact, my starting presupposition doesn't, which I think is more reasonable.
Views that people have, they're often very impoverished, and once they start to fill it in more, they can see the falsity of it.
So what else do you think is at play here in the...
What's interesting is about all this, and I appreciate the way Trent's doing this because he's like bang, bang, bang. It's almost like bullet point form, and I love that type of form instead of like bloviating. I don't think Trent's bloviating here, and I appreciate that. But I wonder how many theists, how many Christians have ever heard the answers, the rebuttals I'm giving in bullet point form. Just boom. I'm just boom, just kicking them out there, right? Just, it's easy. I wonder if they could steelman me. If they know, if they're listening to Trent Horn right now as a theist, as a Christian, that they can go, oh, but this is exactly what an atheist would say here. And this is what an atheist would say here. That they just like off the top of their head, they know. And based on my experience of going to America Fest on Monday and talking to a lot of Christians, most of them have no clue. They listen to guys like Trent Horn. Oh yeah, I mean, it's just so obvious. I mean, they could not for 1 second steelman the opposing view. I'd say, if I was to guess, I'd say maybe 5% of Christians can do it. And I bet you Trent could do it. But the question is, will he? On this podcast, on this video.
The West in our culture that is causing people to find Christianity to be unbelievable?
Well, I think that many people, I think a lot of times people have a difficulty with Christianity. And there's a few things I can throw out there. One would be moral objections. I think in many cases, people have moral objections, especially to Christian sexual morality or the Christian perspective on life, like opposition to abortion, because they operate from an impoverished moral view. It's a very minimalistic moral view that they have, which says that an action is only wrong if it causes pain to someone, if it violates another person's...
An action is only wrong if God says so, if it goes contrary to his nature. Like, why is one automatically better than the other? With Christianity, Judaism, and even Islam, what is right or wrong is sometimes divorced from pain and suffering. And sometimes, well, Jesus himself said, you will suffer for my name's sake. Don't expect your life to be good here on planet Earth. You will suffer. So when it comes to human suffering, Christianity actually says, you know, a lot of it's going to happen. Just suck it up. Just hope you die soon and then go to heaven. That's what Paul said, right? He wishes he was dead, but he had to stay and keep trotting on.
Or what they desire. And so if they see two people engaging in sexual acts and both people seem to be enjoying it, you know, whether it's people of the opposite sex or the same sex, they struggle to see how something like that could be wrong. They only see morality in terms of pain and violating the wills of others, and not in terms of things like what is ordered for human beings, what is disordered for human beings. I had a debate on the Whatever podcast.
I'm not so sure that's true. I think you can be an atheist and still say what is ordered for human beings, what's not. Yeah, I don't think, Trent, you can go that far. But what You would say, see, because I've been doing this for so many years, you would say, but where's your grounding for it, right? Even if an atheist would say, these are things that are not normal for humans to do based on evolution. Like we didn't evolve to eat our own feces, right? There's a pretty simple example. A guy like Trent Horn would say, well, but why is that really wrong to eat your own feces? And I'd say, well, because it can lead to disease, it can lead to suffering. Yeah, but who cares? Why is it really ultimately wrong? And whenever a Christian says really wrong, ultimately wrong, what they mean is God wrong. Why is it God wrong? Well, I don't believe in God. Well, then you don't believe anything's wrong. That's basically what it boils down to.
Where I showed that people can have very, very disordered behavior, people that see that it's repulsive, even if it doesn't involve violating the wills of other human beings. That's why people have to think a little bit more about that. The materialist worldview also comes into play, especially opposition to things like miracles. There's also a kind of shallow approach to history that lumps things like Christianity in with every other religion, saying that every religion is basically the same. And so if they can't all be true, that means they all must be false. And a failure to...
If they all can't be true, that means all must be false. I have never met an atheist who says that.
See things like the unique evidence for Christianity and its central claim of the resurrection of Christ.
I have met atheists who will say it's more likely if there's 1,000 religions and we know 999 of them are false. Let's say we know this. Maybe it's more likely that the 1,000th one is also false because of pattern seeking. We see a white duck come around the bush, another white duck come around the bush, another white duck come around the bush. What color is the next duck coming around the bush? It's probably white.
And how that unique evidence is different from other religions, many of which do not have miracle claims as their essential foundation. Islam's central miracle claim is just the unique literary style of the Quran. Buddhism's unique claim is just the unique teachings of Buddha, not that he ever performed miracles. So I think they have these mistaken views of history also that lead them to having a false worldview.
You kind of brought up, I guess, just the supernatural realm, the resurrection, some of these claims that are really at the bedrock of Christianity. And I'm thinking a little bit about your conversation / debate with Matt Dillahunty, which I thought was so interesting. I in particular, the part where you guys got down to the resurrection and the claim, the question was, is it reasonable? Right? That was the topic. And it got to this point in the conversation where he essentially said that there's nothing that God could do to make himself reasonable or believable to Matt.
Yeah, I think that's a bad answer that Matt gives, and I think he's wrong. I mean, even for himself. I find it very difficult to believe that if you, Trent, were to take Matt Dillahunty to a gravesite of someone he personally knew for a big chunk of his life, who's now currently dead, who's been dead for years, and you literally prayed in the name of Jesus, and this person literally had entropy reverse and his body came back together and the ground started to shake and he bubbled through the dirt and soil and he got up and said, "Hey Matt, good to see you again." I find it really hard to believe that Matt would say, "This is a trick. This doesn't mean your God's real." Tell ya, and Matt, Trent, if you want to take me to a gravesite, I can bring you to my favorite uncle's grave, my sister's grave. And if you want to pray in the name of Jesus, I will make you a promise. As I know myself better than anybody else, except for maybe your God, if he's real. I'll make you this promise based on my being, that if you pray in the name of Jesus for my sister or my favorite uncle to come back to life, I will throw away naturalism. I will never be a naturalist again. And if you do it in the name of Jesus and it happens immediately, I predict there's a strong chance I'll become a Christian again, and that Well, the question mark I would have is what type of Christian would I become? But I'm very, very confident I would no longer be a materialist or a naturalist. And I don't care what other atheists say about that. They think that's still not justified. Don't care. You know me, Trent. I don't care about what atheists think about me. Right, Matt Dillahunty?
I don't remember exactly how he worded it, but it was essentially, maybe you can.
He said he didn't know it was true. He just said that he knows he hadn't seen it yet. And so I asked him, well, what would good evidence for the resurrection look like?
Right.
And he said, I don't know what it would look like. I just know that I haven't seen it because of the evidence for the resurrection of Christ and have that reaction for themselves. So I found his position to be inconsistent in that regard. That my basic argument with Matt was the resurrection is a conjunction of three claims. Jesus was alive. Jesus died. Jesus was seen alive. He died, and he was seen alive again. That's the resurrection claims. And
that he's God. Well, yeah, he said resurrection claims, right? Okay.
Nearly all people find the first two unproblematic.
And by the way, I put the link up if somebody wants to call in, if theists want to call in.
Jesus was seen alive at one point, and he died. And so whatever evidence you have for showing he was alive at one point, well, you can show evidence he was alive at another point. Like people saw him, that they were alive. They were willing to even suffer and risk death to proclaim that they had seen him alive after his death.
By the way, that's probably the number one go-to for Christians to justify their belief. With the people I interviewed on Monday, martyrdom came up so many times. And then when I said, well, where do you get these martyrdom stories from, facts from? It's not found in the Bible, except for maybe one or two. And it's surprising, most of them didn't know. And why can't I pin this? Pin the link.
And I think Matt saw the problem here, that he wasn't even willing to grant it was reasonable to believe that Jesus existed or was crucified, which goes against what every mainstream historian will tell you. And Matt's reply to that is, well, I'm not a historian. Okay, then don't go making these kinds of universal pronouncements about history then.
He then went on to make the claim.
Yeah, I'll make a pronouncement about history that these martyrdom stories don't, I would say all of them, if not almost, I'll back off. Almost all of them don't tell you any specifics on could they have recanted? Would they actually have lived if they would have recanted? Did the people actually claim to have seen with their own eyes Jesus rise from the dead, so they know it's true and then lie about it? No. Okay, somebody wants in here. Rational agnostic. Oh, I prefer theists.
Hey, Doug, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I was going to talk. I know I'm not a believer, but I wanted to say something to Trent.
Okay, say something to Trent.
He was going into this whole bloviation, might I say, on the quote unquote evidence. I wish someone would ask him, how could we make that evidence better? Like, we have the names of the. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wonder if he would engage. Go ahead.
I think most Christians would freely admit that the evidence could be better. I honestly do think they would admit that. But they would say something like, well, but given 2,000 years ago, like, what do you expect? Like, that's what we have. You would expect people would write things down, and we didn't have smartphones back then. We didn't have DNA testing back then. So it is what it is. But the bottom line is, when you're talking about an omnipotent being, he could have made batteries that he could have made a smartphone. He could have done the DNA testing even 2,000 years ago and preserved it in a certain way that it would last to today. We could radiocarbon date the smartphone, everything to see, okay, is it in the ballpark? Is it in the first century? Yeah. And here we got video of Jesus being nailed on a cross. Look, it's even in color because God's omnipotent. I mean, there's no way a theist can say we couldn't have better evidence. But you know what they would say then, right?
Go ahead.
Can you guess what they would say if I said?
Well, I know exactly what they'd say. You still wouldn't believe.
Or
they would say you.
Yeah, I agree with you. Some would say that, but some others would say, well, if the evidence was too good, then we wouldn't have the free will to reject it.
Yeah, God gave us free will.
Yeah. And then if they say that, you bring up, well, Satan is pretty sure that, certain, in fact, that God exists and Jesus is real and is God and died and rose again. Like Satan knows this, and he still rejects God. So why can't humans still reject God, having that really good evidence? And that they don't really have a good answer to.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is to, like, if someone ever talks to Trent, which he does talk to people, but I hate anyways, if they were to say, okay, let's take something like the Shroud of Turin, and the Shroud of Turin I think it appears in history around 300 AD. There's no chain of custody before then. These holy artifacts, these miracles, like the sun miracle, the sun miracle, right?
Yeah, Fatima,
yeah. All these things could be infinitely better when we look at the story, because there's so many things that make you doubt it. I've yet to read one miracle claim that is cut and dry. Doctors confirm someone's leg grew back. Capturing Christianity did one where a guy from like 800 AD had a limb grow back.
Yeah,
I can't confirm that. So these are all really bad evidences for miracles and for holy artifacts.
It's funny you should bring up Fatima, because when I debated Trent, he admitted that at least in some respects, the evidence for Fatima is better than the evidence for the resurrection, because they had newspaper clippings, they had sworn testimony from eyewitnesses who identify themselves, like interviews. But anyhow, I'll let you go. And
thanks. Good talk today.
Yep.
That's it.
And we'll plug away on the next one. Next point.
That you asked him, what is science? And he said, science is knowledge, or it comes from the same word as knowledge, which then, as I was listening to that, raised the question of science.
Yeah, he's doing...
I really don't want to hear anything about Matt Dillahunty.
Like when the Grand Canyon was formed. Yet we look at the evidences to understand how this process occurred, even though we were not there to observe it, based on what has been left behind. And the same thing, we would do the similar scientific historical investigation of the origins of the Christian faith. None of us were around.
Listen says that's irrelevant, the smartphone, because people wouldn't know what to do with such technology at the time. It doesn't matter what people need to know what to do. We're talking about God here. He knows what to do. So in other words, what I'm saying is God could have taken a smartphone, recorded the whole thing. There's carbon in a smartphone. It can be radio dated. And God could have had an angel interview every disciple, say, what's your name? My name is John. John, where are you from? What do you do? I'm a fisherman. I'm not educated. I like long walks on the beach. Okay, well, that's enough, John. John, what did you see? Well, I actually saw nothing because I wasn't there. But Jesus, my friend and leader and God, he died and hey, in fact, hey, wait, Jesus, come over here. This guy doesn't believe you're alive. Like this could all be on smartphone. With an all-powerful God, you could put a battery in it that never dies. In fact, we could go even one step further. God could make a time machine, although some say that's contradictory. But let's say God made a time machine, and since God is all-powerful, He could make it 1 second be like 1 year. So every human being on the planet take 1 second of their life, which will feel like a year. Go meet Jesus back in the first century. See it with your own eyes. God could do that. This is what I mean. I think every Christian would have to admit that the evidence could be way, 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 way better. And if the consequences of belief or disbelief are so huge, why not do it? And people still are free to reject it, because Satan did. I would really love a Christian to call in right now and tell me where my reasoning's flawed. What am I saying that's unreasonable, especially for an all-powerful God? To me, this is just science.
To see Jesus be crucified or to see the disciples preach his resurrection, what we're left with are the artifacts from that. What would we expect to have if Jesus died, rose again, and then appeared to his followers and gave them the Great Commission to spread the gospel?
Yeah, you know what? I agree with Trent here. What do you expect if you don't assume an all-powerful God, but except for in the instance of a resurrection, let's say that God did that. What Trent's missing here is that if you add in the clause, what do you expect if a man named Jesus actually died and rose again, and he wanted the world to know, and he wanted the world to believe, he desires that none should perish. Then ask the question, Trent, what do you expect to have? That changes everything. Now, I would expect to have anonymous gospels written decades later. I would expect one man to be the only guy who claims to have seen Jesus alive in the first person, which is Paul. I would expect half the New Testament to be written by one man, which is Paul. I would expect dependence between authors like we see, if you accept the traditional authorship. So I would agree with Trent. I would expect all that. But if you expect people to believe it, then I would have different expectations. I would expect Jesus to have gone to China. I would have expected Jesus to visit the Aztecs in South America. I would have expected Jesus to make even a trip to Siberia and talk to the people there. I would expect Jesus to have preserved the initial writings. I would have expected Jesus to write himself. I would expect these writings to be preserved in every continent before there were ships to transport them there. I mean, I would even expect Jesus to put a preserved copy of the Gospels on the moon. So know where beforehand, because Jesus is all-knowing, except for when he's going to return, to put it where the Americans would land the lunar module, and they take their first step on the moon. And so, what's this thing lying here? Whoa. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John on the moon? You gotta be kidding me. The Russians did this.
Well, what we would have is what we exactly find. We have written documents attesting to this. We have the spread of early churches with the oral proclamation of this good news, with it being passed on in things like sacred tradition. We have people being willing to suffer for this belief, a radical change in people's behaviors and worldviews. We have what we would expect to have if Jesus rose from the dead and commissioned his disciples to spread that good news.
Okay. I like Trent's answer, and I'm quite sure Trent will hear what I'm about to say sometime in the future. He might even be here right now. And Trent, if you're here, come on in. So Trent just gave a nice outline of what we would expect to have if Jesus rose from the dead. Now, here's my question to Trent. Would you expect to have that if he didn't? But people wanted you to believe he did. That is the question. In other words, my question is, would you expect people to write stories that might not be true? We have many examples in history of people writing untrue stories. That maybe some things are true in the story, but the story, the root of it is not true. Like the Quran, like the Book of Mormon. 2 examples. So if you expect to have the New Testament exactly the way you see it today, and Jesus did not rise from the dead, I mean, now you got a problem. Some smart people told me this is Bayesian type thinking, and maybe that just leads to going to hell. I don't know. Now, my guess is many Christians do not have that expectation, but I do. And this is the difference. This is maybe partly why I'm not a believer. Because I expect the New Testament to be written exactly the way it was, even if Jesus didn't rise from the dead. If you're a Christian listening, digest that for like a week. Really think about that. Think about other religions. If Muhammad never really met God in a cave and got the very words of the Quran dictated to him through an angel, Gabriel, if that didn't happen, could the Quran still exist? Of course. If Jesus never rose from the dead, could the gospel still exist? Of course. Well, Doug, you're just saying they're a bunch of liars. I actually think the view of lying back in the first century is a little different than the view of lying today. If the traditional authorship is correct, and I don't think it is, but even if it is, yeah, they lied. Why would they do that? For a greater good. Just like you lied to the Nazis that you got Jews hiding under the baseboards. I made a video on that. But Doug, they died for the beliefs. Whoa. How do you know that? That they died and had a chance to recant all this? We've been over this a million times. And if you're a Christian, you've never heard the responses to this. Apologia has great videos on this. I have great videos on this. Everybody has great videos on this, on martyrdom. Even Sean McDowell, who did his dissertation on the martyrdom, says, well, we can only really be confident in maybe 2. And even then, they don't claim to have seen with their own eyes that they saw what they saw, and there's no talk about recanting. They would have lived if they would have told the truth. Maybe they did recant, and then the traditions say that they didn't. I mean, there's so many options.
See, this is interesting. This is one of the, I guess, one of these bedrock beliefs that I'm trying to scratch the surface of in this conversation, where from the viewpoint of, like you said, it's got to be in the lab. It has to be at, something that you can actually observe yourself, something that you can put under a microscope. When that becomes the only valid epistemology in someone's worldview, then I can understand why you wouldn't trust eyewitnesses in history.
It might not be the only valid form of epistemology, but in my opinion, it's the most reliable. Like, just look at politics, how people are disagree. They can see the exact same evidence and disagree on what it means, how important it is. Look at personal experiences of this feeling of the intertestament of the Holy Spirit, the burning of the bosom. There's so many defeaters for that. It seems like hard science, I'm not talking about psychology, of course, but hard science, if you want to find areas of agreement that no matter what bias, what culture you come from, where you live, science is probably the only area of our lives where people who hate each other come to agreement and saying, yep, the angle of incidence does equal the angle of reflection. Yep, the acceleration due to gravity at sea level is 9.8 meters per second squared. Yep, I hate you, but you agree with me there? You do. Oh, man. Maybe it's based on something true. Try that with religion. It will not happen. You will not get two religions that hate each other, who strongly disagree with each other, to agree on the fundamentals. Muslims, Jesus never really died. Christians, of course Jesus died. Mormons, God the Father is material. Christians, Jews, Muslims, no, he's not material, he's spiritual. I mean, Mormons, God has his own planet. I mean, you're not... Now, sure, you'll have some agreement on some things.
And then adding on top of that, the fact that there are different translations and the way that the Bible was formed, and like all of those things that to me or to you are not problematic because we have a belief in the supernatural, we have a belief in God, we have a belief in history to...
I would also say it's not problematic for me because I have a belief in the historical record. I don't think the historical record is infallible, but I think that we can know about many historical events. We find them unproblematic to affirm the story of William Wallace chronicled in the movie Braveheart, even though I think the first account of it was written by a blind minstrel like 150 years later, or other accounts of people in...
Yeah, the thing is he's giving very mundane accounts in history, right? But I think both these gentlemen, I don't know the other guy's name, Mr. Daily Dose, with the beard and the mustache like Tom Selleck. Nice mustache, by the way. If I give you any piece of historical narrative, and I insert a fantastical claim, I'll bet real money both these guys won't believe it. Like my ancestor literally flew over the Grand Canyon. Let's say it was literally in a text, a book from the first century. And a man literally flew. On its face, they would not believe it. And then, in order for them to believe it, wouldn't you know it, the evidence has to mirror the evidence of the New Testament. Is there 4 Gospels? Did 500 people see it? And 12? Was there prophecies? Was there a genre, an expectation? I mean, it's so, like, Christians, do you realize this is what you're doing? When there's a fantastical claim in history and you end up saying you would only believe it if its evidence mirrored the evidence that we have for the resurrection? You don't see how convenient that is to you, for you? I mean, Christians should not be watching this because I'm making this too easy to debunk. But we move on.
Ancient Rome or ancient Greece or in medieval eras that often have less evidence than Jesus, and yet we don't find those historical episodes problematic. We have good historical evidence for knowing the basic foundational elements of the Christian faith.
Like?
And I have no reason to doubt them. And people
like, I don't even think you have good reason to believe there was 12 disciples. Now, there was some disciples. I think you have good reason to believe that based on the historical method. Do you have good, based on the historical method, Trent, can you say that Mary, Joseph, and Jesus went to Egypt after some time after Jesus was born, as said in the book of Matthew? Matthew's the only place where it's mentioned. And if you like the historical method, then you, I think, like the fact that you should have more than one attestation of a claim. You should lower your confidence that that ever happened, that Jesus, Mary, and Joseph went to Egypt. You should lower your confidence that Jesus appeared to 500 people, because Paul's the only one who made that claim, that specific claim. You should even lower your confidence there was guards at the tomb, because only Matthew says that. Right? I'm quite sure. Only Matthew. In fact, most historians don't believe that. Most historians don't believe Jesus walked on water. So you should lower your confidence on that too. But these are those historians who don't believe that. They're just biased with their naturalistic worldview. Okay, granted.
Who simply appeal to skepticism for skepticism's sake, I don't think that that's really a good way to live when we're trying to understand the world around us.
Mr. Listen in the live stream chat, it seems like you're pushing back hard against me. Instead of tiring your fingers, why don't you call in? And why isn't the link working? I can't pin it today. Usually I can pin it.
And although it's not consistent, like you brought up, people accept all kinds of things in history that, you know, that they don't require as much evidence for as the resurrection. I know that the person listening to this right now is going to say, yes, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And that's where this kind of always goes, which I think is important to bring out, just that it exposes that there is a double standard, but it gets...
By the way, 5 years ago, most Christians would disagree with that. I think Christians are coming around to that. I love making videos of people like Mike Winger saying almost exactly that. I'm only going to believe in evolution via comet descent if I see like huge amounts of evidence. Well, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, right? I think even Cameron Bertuzzi has now succumbed to that. In fact, I think he said, I have a video where he said that about some parts of Roman Catholicism, like a Fatima, where they don't use the word extraordinary, but it's like, it's so detailed, it's so big. I mean, I need evidence. That claim is so big. I need evidence that I just don't think eyewitness testimony is enough.
Gets down to, I think, the more primary point, which is that your real problem isn't really with the historical record. Your real problem is that there's a claim that exists within the historical record that defies what you believe to be possible, namely the resurrection.
No. And this is where Christians get it wrong all the time. I would say most atheists would not say it's impossible. They would just say that the evidence does not match the claim. That it's more likely that Jesus was a liar. It's more likely Jesus was a lunatic. It's more likely Jesus never made the claim in the first place, and this is legend, than Jesus actually is God in flesh and rose from the dead. I mean, if you didn't care about Jesus, and if you weren't indoctrinated in it, everything I just said is so extremely reasonable. That people write stories, that people lie, that people are mistaken, that people are crazy, that people are nuts. Like, if you forget about Jesus for a second, just think about all the other claims. It's very easy for a Christian to say, yeah, of course, people are crazy, people are nuts, people make up stories, people make mistakes. But not in the case of the Gospels. Because why would they die for a lie? It always comes back to that.
Yeah, and I'm really skeptical of this kind of epistemology. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. What does that mean? Does the word extraordinary mean the same thing each time it's used in that statement? It would seem so. So does that mean miraculous claims require miraculous evidence? Well, then that means you can never prove anything, because the miraculous evidence would need miraculous evidence of its own.
No, I wouldn't say it means that. It means that if someone says that so-and-so, their neighbor, walked on their swimming pool on water, and that's all you have, someone's word, one person's word. I saw a guy walk on water yesterday. I'm saying that Magnum PI here and Trent Horn, I would say you have bad epistemology if you say, I believe it. And you know what? If they were both listening right now, they'd say, I agree. If that's all you knew, that's not enough. And if you admit that, you are on the road of saying extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, because you're basically admitting one guy's testimony is not enough. How about two? Is that enough now? And then they would start asking questions. Well, are they independent? Are they in cahoots with each other? See, you want more, right? Did anybody take a video of it? Like, can he replicate this? Like, if I come over, will he walk on water in front of me? Like, you're requiring more and more. And then you might believe it if you get like a physicist or some type of scientist to come in and say, yeah, there's no fiberglass underneath the surface of the water. This is water. We throw a lead hammer in, it sinks. We throw wood in, it floats. Yeah, this is water. We can drink it. Okay, and tomorrow this person's going to come and walk on it. Let's look at his shoes. Yeah, this is a real person. And then they do it. We've got cameras. We've got different people, different biases watching. Then I and these two guys would believe it. An extraordinary claim requires extraordinary evidence. It's the amount of evidence. It's like, we got this and we got this. We got tested. We got cameras. We got the hammer, the lead hammer. We got the water tested. We could drink it. I mean, none of that's miraculous. Each piece is not extraordinary in itself. But when you pile it all up, yeah, we believe it. And all those pieces of evidence, by the way, are better than what you have in the Gospels or in the New Testament.
To bolster it. Does it mean unusual? Does it mean unusual claims require evidence that is unusual? Well, I would say that, yeah, the resurrection is certainly unusual, but the evidence that we have for it, the collection of testimonies, both from St. Paul, as well as from the accounts of things like group appearances of Jesus to the apostles, that's recorded in 1 Corinthians 15, that's very unusual evidence. Most psychologists dismiss the idea that a person can have a group hallucination of something. When people
like, I would love if Trent Horn was here. I'd ask him, okay, what do you think I'm thinking? Predict what I'm going to say next. And I'm curious to see if he would even know where to start. Like, do we know what all 500 people saw? Let's say there were 500 people when Jesus appeared to them. If I gave a piece of paper to every single person of the 500 and say, sketch Jesus. Describe Jesus. Color of his hair, color of his eyes. Beard, like all the way down, length of hair. Would they all say the same thing? Like pretty close? Did they all see the same thing? Like, this is a great question to ask Christians. Like, if we had those 500 people and had them answer some very basic questions on what Jesus looked like, and if they differed materially, how could it be that the text says that Jesus appeared to 500, yet they all saw something different? What does that tell you? It tells you that they had some type of what I would call a Pentecostal experience. That they're imagining things.
Say this, well, extraordinary events require extraordinary evidence. I think a lot of times the examples they give, it doesn't really make the point. They'll say, you don't need ordinary. Like if I say I have a dog in my house, then you just need the testimony. It's fine. If I say I have a dragon at my house, then you need a lot.
He's picking the two animals I pick. So he does listen to me.
More evidence, or you're a lot more skeptical. But I think we should really ask questions. Well, why do we reach that intuition in that case? I think in a lot of these counterexamples, the extraordinary claim counterexamples, it's because, like in that case, well, I'm skeptical that you have a dragon in your home because I have good evidence to believe dragons do not exist. Not just that there's a lack of evidence for dragons. I have evidence, dragons from zoology, dragons do not exist because if dragons were a part of the natural ecosystem, then we would observe dragons.
Ken Ham says dragons existed.
We would have dragon fossils. We would have more evidence for them like we have for other creatures in zoology. But the fact that we have good evidence that dragons do not exist, then that gives me already initial evident reason to doubt your claim. And
see, this is perfect. Because we don't have good evidence that dragons exist, we can be more skeptical. Do we have good evidence that people come back from the dead after 3 days? Do we have good evidence that once someone's dead, not a near-death experience, not someone being dead in a frozen pond and then being revived even 8 hours later, but I'm talking dead for 3 days. They're starting to stink. That's how dead they are. Do we have any verifiable evidence in any type, okay, except for Jesus, because they all believe it, Jesus, yeah. But except for Jesus, do we have any background knowledge that happens? This is the same as the dragon. And I know I say dragon funny.
You would need a lot more to counterbalance that opposing evidence. Now, with the resurrection of Jesus, we do not have similar kinds of evidence that Jesus did not rise from the dead, similar that we have that dragons do not exist.
Oh boy. So the default position, Jesus rose from the dead until proven otherwise?
We do not have similar, well, if Jesus rose from the dead, we'd have all this kinds of evidence, and we don't. In the same vein as if dragons existed, we'd have evidence, and we don't. We don't have evidence that shows the proposition Jesus rose from the dead is false.
Oh boy. Your default position ought to be, I'll make this claim, if you're a reasonable human being who's a product of the Enlightenment, your default position is Jesus never rose from the dead. If, let's say, you're hearing about Christianity for the first time, I mean, this is so incredibly reasonable. I actually find it preposterous that anybody would disagree with it. If you knew nothing about Christianity and a guy like Trent Horn came up to you and said a man rose from the dead 2,000 years ago, you ought to laugh in his face. If that's all he's told you so far. You ought to. In fact, your scriptures, Trent, says the same thing. What I just said. The gospel, the good news that Jesus saved you from your sins, that he rose from the dead, is foolishness to those who are perishing. But to the believers, it's the word of God, it's the hope, it's the meaning, it's the purpose. But to people who are not indoctrinated in it, who don't believe it, if you just say it, they're going to think you're nuts. Your own scriptures admit this. So then the question is there enough evidence to say you're not nuts? I say no, you say yes, and that's where we disagree.
Now, a skeptic might say, well, yeah, we do. We have evidence that people don't rise from the dead. Okay?
Oh, yeah. There
We
he
have
goes.
evidence that when you bury them, they stay in the ground and they stay there. And that's the reason that we doubt that Jesus rose from the dead, because of this overarching background claim that that dead people stay dead.
Okay,
But I would say,
okay. Now, I would say, I'm going to take my own medicine here. I'm going to try to predict what Trent's going to say. And I listened to the first few minutes in the beginning to see if I would like this, but I have honestly not listened to this part. He's either going to say that when you believe in God, an all-powerful God, then miracles are possible, and that it is nothing for God to raise himself from the dead. He could say that. What else could he say? He actually might not say that because the atheist doesn't believe God exists. So then he's probably going to go to the evidence. We have eyewitness accounts, which you really don't. You have one, then the rest is hearsay. Will he go into prophecy? Maybe, but I don't think so. Yeah, I think he's going to go with something like eyewitness accounts and empty tomb. He might go with, if your background knowledge is that God exists and does miracles, intervenes in the world, then raising from the dead is no problem. It's one of those two things. We'll see.
Say, well, that's not a problem for my worldview. In fact, for Jesus's resurrection to be a miracle, it requires the claim "dead people stay dead" to be true. If that wasn't true, the resurrection wouldn't be special. If lots of people just rose from the dead randomly, who cares? Jesus did it. The resurrection.
Okay, that's a little weird. He's basically saying it's a miracle. But how does that relate to the dragon and the dog? So if I say I have a dragon in my garage and I make this additional claim, that's a miracle. It's a miracle I have a dragon in my garage. And you say, we have no evidence that dragons even exist. What are you talking about? You have well, of course we don't. This is what makes it a miracle that I have a dragon in my garage. This is the analogy.
Resurrection only stands out because of this background knowledge of the natural states of affairs. That doesn't show that Jesus did.
Why do I have a feeling I got like 3/4 of my brain tied behind my back right now?
Not rise from the dead, just because most people stay dead.
Just to make it fair.
Also, this idea, well, we have this uniform experience and there's no testimony can overcome it. Yeah, well, that's like, imagine British sailors met people in the Polynesian islands and they tell them stories about how in the winter in England, you can walk across a lake. It's frozen. The Polynesian islanders would have no idea what they're talking about. Their entire lives and cultural experience is that water is liquid. It's never solid. So there's nothing that could change their mind on that, even though they're incorrect. Their universal experience is actually truncated. So people say, well, we have this universal experience and people don't rise from the dead. Well, maybe it's truncated. Maybe there are exceptions to that, like in the case of Jesus rising from the dead because he's God incarnate. I threw a lot out there at you, but hopefully.
Yeah, that's sort of what I initially said. Well, because he's God incarnate. So then if you're God, you can rise from the dead. But maybe, to parallel him with the dragon, species tend to have fossils and records of their existence with their bones, but maybe dragons are just an example of a type of species that don't. Their bones disappear when they die. So maybe it's just an exception. That's basically what he said about Jesus and people rising from the dead.
It's a good start.
No, I think that that's very helpful, because I think that and I'm not trying to pick on Matt Dillahunty, but he just represents a particular way of viewing the world. And I think in his mind, and
why does Magnum PI like Matt Dillahunty so much? Just stop talking about him.
All the people that feel the same way, the resurrection claim is like the dragon in your house claim. But what I'm interested in is trying to understand essentially the huge gap in perception between someone like myself or someone like you who looks at the world around us, like we've already talked about morality, consciousness, there's the existence itself. There's all these different factors that we're looking at, and we're saying, not to mention personal, direct encounter with God through relationship that we have based on the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, which gives you that direct knowledge, which is, I never use that as an argument because it is kind of like the Polynesian example that you use where it's like, but we've been to a place where water.
Yet it's the most powerful for you, Magnum PI, right? I never use personal experience as an argument to others because, I mean, I can't defend it at all, but it's the most powerful one for me personally. I remember being in church that one day, and I literally got tingles. I literally felt the presence of the Holy Spirit. How many Christians? Raise your hand if that's happened to you. I bet you every Christian listening right now knows exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, I was so sad and depressed that one year, that 1 month, that 1 week, and I would not have made through that without that personal relationship with Jesus. Isn't it funny how when you're the most sad, you're the most closest to God? You feel the comfort. It is tangible. It's real. Guess what? It's made up in your head. It's your way. It's your body's way of dealing with tragedy and trauma. And then, of course, other people help you, and you attribute that to God as well when they're just humans helping humans. See, I can explain all this.
Freezes, but that look, and we've been to a place where God is knowable, but that only exists once you've passed from death to life and once you've actually like entered into a relationship with God through Christ. So it's hard to argue from that personal perspective because people could just say you're crazy and whatever. So, but my point is, it always seems like it comes back to this sort of God of the gaps idea, or this idea that like we're looking at all of these different indicators in reality, and we're saying that the best explanation for them, as in an affirmative sense,
Right.
is a being like God. And then that somehow gets interpreted or heard as if we're saying we can't understand what the explanation for these things is, and so we're just going to fill God into it. And
Right.
this is something I'm very interested in. And
Well, Kate, I understand what he's saying. The best explanation he believes is God. What are the other explanations, Magnum PI? I would see if he could even articulate them. Like if he starts going, well, our existence just popped out of nothing, to me, red flags up. Like, no, you haven't even begun.
this is why I keep going back to the existence of God and the existence of a supernatural, because I do think that it sits beneath the resurrection. Like if we can't have a conversation around at this level, then I think the resurrection will always sound like a dragon, like you're saying that there's a dragon inside of your house. It will always come across like that.
You know what's interesting?
Whoa, what did he just admit? Unless what?
God into it, and it's interpreted or heard as if we're saying we can't understand what the explanation for these things is, and so we're just going to fill God into it. And I this is something I'm very interested in, and this is why I keep going back to the existence of God and the existence of a supernatural, because I do think that it sits beneath the resurrection. Like if we can't have a conversation around at this level, then I think the resurrection will always sound like a dragon, like you're saying that there's a dragon inside of your house.
Okay. Yeah. He's basically saying you basically have to start with God, otherwise the resurrection is foolishness. I strongly disagree with Magnum PI here, because Jews, Orthodox Jews, believe in God. They believe in Yahweh. And they think your resurrection is silly. There are many theists. There's probably more theists in the world than atheists who think the resurrection is silly and still believe in God. Is God in the habit of raising people from the dead? Answer, no. Even if God exists, this is not something he normally does. I think all Christians have to agree with that. So what makes Jesus special? Well, because Jesus was God. Well, why would you think Jesus is God? Because it says so in the book. Oh, it says so. Well, we got 4 Gospels. It says it's so in the 4 Gospels, and Paul said it. Oh, that's good enough evidence for you to say a man was perfect, a man was God? Shame on you. if that's all it takes. Shame on you. You ought to be shamed. I mean, I feel like selling you ice in a blizzard.
It will always come.
I mean, you can believe in, the bottom line is this, you can believe a God exists. You still have all your work ahead of you to demonstrate, to show, to convince people that this God actually wanted to raise one particular individual in history from the dead, that this one particular individual was God himself. I mean, no, you can't just go there and say, well, if God exists, then, I mean, I go from being viewed as crazy and nuts for this belief to now I'm rational. No, you don't get that pass. You're still crazy. You're still nuts, even if you believe in God.
Come across like that.
You know what's interesting is that atheists also engage in God of the gaps reasoning. They will accuse Christians, oh, well, you just think that I don't know what happened, therefore God did it, so your arguments don't work. And yet many atheists will say that they're open-minded. They're willing to change their minds. If you could prove God exists, they would believe. They're open to the evidence. Mm-hmm. To which then I ask them, all right, what specific evidence would convince you that God exists?
Trent, are you thinking about me right now? Is Trent thinking about PineCreek as he's saying this? Light this on fire in the name of Jesus. So simple. In fact, you know what? I won't even soak it in water. Trent, pray in the name of Jesus that this will light on fire. I know I'm not tricking myself. Wonder if he's going to talk about me next.
So give me, and don't just be vague. Don't just say, well, it has to be repeatable, has to be testable. That's still very vague. Give me a specific illustration to show that God exists. And by the way, if it were repeatable and testable, you might just think, oh, this is a force of nature, not God.
Yeah, if it's repeatable, I agree with Trent here, but it should happen once every quarter to match the S&P earnings cycle. Every 4 months, God goes into a different country and raises someone from the dead, and he announces it ahead of time. So God, through a prophet, maybe Trent Horn would be a good prophet, says, January 1st, I'm going to go to Somalia, and I'm going to raise them from the dead. CNN, CBC, ABC, NBC, every country. Be there. I'll give you the GPS coordinates. There's a dead guy there, been dead for years. I'm going to raise him from the dead. And then they're going to go there and they're going to say, is there a dead guy down there? Yeah. Okay. Let's dig him up. Let's take his DNA. Okay. Yeah, he's dead. Well, who is this guy? Yeah. Okay. Okay. And then they just twiddle their thumbs until Jesus arrives. And then poof, Jesus is there. He raises from the dead. Got cameras, everything. Take his DNA again. Yeah, it matches. I mean, it happened. And then Jesus says, okay, guys, we'll see you in 3 months. I'm going to do the same thing in Japan. And then 3 months after that, I'm going to do the same thing in Siberia. 3 months after that, we're going to go to Brazil. It's not repeatable all the time, but every 3 months in every different countries. I mean, I think I'd have to become a Christian at that point if that actually happened.
God, because it's repeatable and testable in this way. If God can choose to act or not act, that's why I always find, for example, that studies on the efficacy of prayer, I find them to be useless in trying to show whether God exists or whether prayer is helpful, because God is not a force of nature that scientists can measure. God doesn't respond to prayers in the same way that gravity responds.
Okay, if Trent admits this, that you can't put God in a test tube, that he's not like a force of nature that can be experimentally verified, then every time an atheist says there's no evidence for God, and what they mean by evidence is this repeatable, testable thing, scientific thing, then every Christian should say, you are right. There is no evidence for God. If that's what you mean by evidence. And they should just walk away. Say to the naturalist, say to the atheist that they are right. There's no evidence for God. We got philosophical stuff, but that doesn't count in your worldview. We got personal testimonies and feelings and emotions, but that doesn't count in your worldview. Can't put God in a naturalistic test tube. So you are correct. There is zero evidence for God currently. And just admit that they're right. But it's so difficult for them to do that.
To a falling object. He can choose to say no or choose to answer a prayer in a different way. Or if he knows you're doing a study on him, he might choose to not participate in it. So back to the atheists, they do the same thing with God of the gaps reasoning. So it's a good example. They'll say, all right, if you prayed over an amputee and their limb healed, then I would believe God exists. And I would say, okay, what's your reasoning here? It seems like your reasoning in this case is, I don't know of a natural explanation for what I just observed. Therefore, God did it. I mean, right? That's basically the reason.
Therefore, it's more likely God did it. Yeah. I'll give him it. I'll give Trent Horn this. Yeah, I'll use God of the gaps. Now what? Or God of the science, whatever he's saying. I mean, everything that we know about naturalism says that entropy doesn't reverse in that way. That things like a limb on humans don't spontaneously grow back with the incantation of a certain word. So if it does happen, sure, we could be wrong. Sure, God still could not exist, and there's a naturalistic explanation, like aliens or whatever. Sure, that's possible. But if what I'm saying is, let's do it. Do the incantation in Jesus' name. Let's see if it happens, and let's see if people change their minds because of it. And I'm saying, I'm the type of person I think it would happen. Now, some people say, well, maybe God exists and it's not the God of Christianity. True, that could be true too. But let's say someone prays in the name of Allah and it doesn't work, and then someone prays in the name of Jesus and it does. Isn't that better evidence for Jesus? I think so. The real question is, like, I was raised in North America, Christian culture. If someone prayed in the name of Vishnu, am I going to be consistent? I say yes. So if someone prays in the name of Jesus, amputee does not get his limb back, but they pray in the name of Vishnu and it does, I'm going, whoa. Let's go Hinduism. Like, even from a practical standpoint, if I ever lose my arm in an accident, who am I going to pray to? Jesus or Vishnu? Well, I've seen Vishnu work.
Reasoning that they're using in that case. So it's okay for them to have God of the gaps for a very particular hypothetical that they're...
Someone keeps repeating themselves in the live stream chat. Listen. Hey, listen. Your voice is supernatural. In some ways not. You're repeating yourself. I think I already put you in a timeout, so I'll just hide you on my channel.
At least not immediately aware of. But when Christians point out things, and I would say that they're not God of the gaps, by the way. For example, I talked about actualization and potentiality, that we know objects to change or move have to be actualized. They have a potential to move or change. But this actualization series cannot be infinite any more than a train cannot move if it's just an infinite series of boxcars that have potential to move. But
is God a personal God, Trent? Does God have thoughts? Is there something that causes God to think a thought? He would say is nature. So even with God, that change in thoughts has to go infinite in the past. So why can't that happen naturalistically?
Can't actualize their own potential. Instead, there must be a reality that's pure actuality. And okay, so if pure actuality exists, what is that? It can't be material in nature because matter always has potential. It's not temporal. And you would start to tease out what that is.
See, Trent is smart enough to know, he knows what guys like Graham Oppie would say to this. And this is what kind of bothers me, because I will play guys like Trent Horn, their view, and then give the opposite view. But will Magnum PI here ask Trent the question, well, what do naturalists say in response to this argument? Maybe he will. Maybe I'll be shocked. Let's see.
You could do similar arguments for a necessary being or the cause of the universe. And here we're arguing from what we know to some kind of a cause and then logically deducing divine attributes from it. It's not God of the gaps reasoning that one is engaging in. I would say atheists, when they propose, here's what would change my mind, it usually is some kind of God of the gaps reasoning, honestly.
I don't know if I'm the only one, but I'm very tired of these scam likely phone calls. Look at how bad this is for two different people or even millions of different people. Look at those options. They fall on different sides of that.
By the way, I'm starting to get a little bored of this. So please, theists, if you disagree with me, you want to call in, call in.
Yeah, I think what's hard is that eternal matter, like you look at the universe around us and it's easy to accept it exists right around us.
Yep.
And that it existed yesterday and the day before that and the day before that. So what they're doing is they're taking something that's very easy to believe, that the universe around us exists, and then just projecting that backwards in time. So you're starting from something that's known.
It's interesting that he says that believing that the universe exists is easy to believe. Is it easy to believe God exists in the same way? I don't think so. Then why isn't there debates? I know there are some debates, like we're in the Matrix or that everything's an illusion or whatever, but there's no real debates. Does the universe exist? Matt Dillahunty versus Trent Horn. Debate topic. Does the universe exist? That doesn't happen. But it does happen with God. Why? Why does anybody on the planet doubt that a God exists? Or even more importantly, a specific type of God exists?
And then just projecting it back into the unknown to solve your query about, well, why does anything exist? Where did it come from? And I think here what Christians can do is point out that as you project that backwards in time, you start getting a lot of problems here. Even if you don't project it backwards, the fact that yes, the universe exists, that seems pretty obvious. But what's not obvious is, why does it exist? Why is there a universe at all instead of nothing?
I wonder, okay, Trent, if you ever listen to this, I will respect you a lot more if you say this. Why does the universe exist? Great question. But the atheist can ask, well, why does God exist? I'm curious to know if that's going to be his next sentence. And I encourage you, Trent, whenever you ask this question of atheists, ask that question to theists. Why does God exist? And then whatever answer you give, ask yourself, can the atheist give the same type of answer? And of course, you have to say yes. You might disagree with their answer, but they can give it. Brute fact, necessary entity.
Nothing. If it could fail to exist, well, it seems like it would need an explanation for why it exists instead of not existing. If you say, well, it had to exist, it's necessary.
There you
go. Why do you think that? Most things we think of as being necessary cannot be changed, like mathematical truths, for example. But it seems like our universe certainly could have been different. It could have been smaller, bigger, had different laws of physics, different other elements, things like that. And because it could have been, the universe could have been very, very different. It could have had all kinds of different configurations.
Could God have been something different than he is? If you say no, that God had to be what he is, that's just a brute fact.
Could one of those configurations be that the universe, there's just nothing at all? There are just no things? You can keep, there could have been one less atom. There could have been one less quark. Sure. Well, why couldn't there have been, you subtract so much, there could have just been nothing at all. Or you get the mysteries if you try to project it having gone backwards eternally in the past. All right, well, could the infinite past, does that make sense? Are there logical contradictions in a...
Could God have all his omni properties except for not all-knowing?
Universe that has an infinite causal history, and there are people who defend causal finitism, and like William Lane Craig's Kalam argument that would call that into question, the actualization issues that I brought up earlier. So I think here what you can say is, look, what you're doing is you're taking something that's known, the universe around us, and projecting it backwards into the unknown, and you're not seeing the problems here. But as Christians, we do something similar. We take something that's known, agent causation, a being that can choose to act, making things real.
But if God has existed in eternity past, how would he ever have arrived to that decision to create? If God is a personal God who thinks, who can make decisions, and he's always existed, how would he have ever arrived temporally, not in hours and seconds or whatever, how would he have ever arrived to the point of creating. You notice you have the exact same problem with this infinite regress idea as you claim the naturalists do.
Interact with that all the time. We deal with agent causation all the time.
And I think William Lane Craig's he understands what I just said and the problems with that. And your theory of time has to change. You have to go into like a B theory of time that's not temporal, not sequential.
The time to explain why things exist, to explain why we have certain things. And we are projecting that into the unknown as to why the universe works. But we're not doing it in a haphazard way or out of ignorance. We're doing it based on logic and evidence and reason, ultimately pointing back to that as the ultimate cause. So the fact that, take God out of the equation, just say being. There's being, and that gave rise to non-being. There's infinite being itself, the ground of all reality. What is that ultimate foundation? And we're appealing to things that are known, like being or agents, not things that are radically unknown.
Another interesting component of this and I kind of see different versions of this exact conversation playing themselves out in the comment section of my videos all the time, in these long threads that develop as people pontificate on this. And it seems like it also boils down to this point where on the atheist side, they'll just say, I don't know. I just don't know how the original matter got there, how it's logical that it's eternal, or what it's for, or what any of us are for. And I don't know, but I'm okay just not knowing. Why do you religious fanatics feel?
Well, I would make the claim that even Christians don't know. They pretend to know. And even when they pretend to know, they don't know. How did God make the universe? This is a question for Christians like Trent Horn and Magnum PI here. How did he do it? What was the mechanism? You know what they have? The only thing they know? That God spoke it into existence. With his words? Does God have a mouth? Let there be light, and there was light? Did he literally say, let there be light? And did he have to say, let there be light in order for light to appear? Or could he just think it? What was the mechanism? If you really stop to think about it, it's nuts. I believe in this all-powerful, intelligent mind, and all you had to do was create something out of nothing. Well, he didn't use anything. He just used his words. Actually, some theists disagree with what I just said. Some Jews. Because some translations of Genesis 1:1 doesn't say in the beginning. It says, what does it say? Not in the beginning, but when it started, or that it alludes to the fact that the cosmos actually did always exist in its eternal past with God, and then God changed it and brought order to it. Some theists believe that and don't believe that God created ex nihilo out of nothing.
The need to try to...
How many Christians here have heard your pastors say something like that in church? Probably none.
Explain things that you don't understand. And within that question, I also see this misconception about what motivates people like yourself, people like myself. And maybe you can speak into where we're coming from around this particular topic.
Well, I can tell you where you're coming from. You better be saying this the next sentence. And again, I don't know what you're going to say, but there's so much at stake. These worldviews, whether you believe God exists, whether you believe Jesus rose from the dead, we got eternal life at stake here. Heaven and hell, carrots and sticks. Let's see if they answer that way.
Yeah, well, I would say that just because I feel like I know certain things, like that God exists or that God created the universe, it doesn't follow that I don't say I don't know for certain elements. What's interesting here is this is a little bit of an atheist double standard. So atheists will say, I'm comfortable saying I don't know. And Christians always want to rush to an answer, and they're not willing to wait and evaluate the evidence before reaching a conclusion. So they'll chide Christians for that, for knowing that God exists, for example, or that God created the universe. But when atheists ask Christians, well, why did God allow this child to get cancer, for example? And let's say a Christian might say, I don't know. I don't know why God allowed this particular instance of evil. But it doesn't mean that...
Mason, thanks for the donation. Is God's desires determined and random? I think Trent would say God has free will. That his desires are an outflowing of his nature, his free will choice to either create or not create. But then, if that's Trent's answer about where does God's desires come from, his nature that is free and not determined, I mean, now you got the problem of evil.
My entire worldview is overturned because I don't know a certain fact. Here, an atheist may say that that's not acceptable. That's an appeal to mystery. That's dodging the question. That's God of the gaps. So it's so interesting that in some cases, when a Christian says, I don't know, that an atheist would be mad at them. But in other cases, an atheist would say, why can't I say, I don't know where the universe came from? Or I don't know why human beings have moral value or moral responsibility. So I think there's a little bit of a double standard there sometimes.
I think that's a great point. And I also think that attached to the Christian...
Finally, someone's calling in. But he's not a theist. Oh no, it's you.
Hey, Doug. Hey, I just wanted to say sorry for what I said last time we talked. I know it was, well, I'm not going to try and make excuses or anything. I just want to say sorry.
I forgive you,
I was trying to offend you intentionally, and I wish I hadn't done it.
Okay. You apologize for intentionally trying to offend me. Do you want to, for the people who don't know, do you want to tell them exactly what you're apologizing for? By the way, I forgive you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I said a crude joke about your sister.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, my sister died of MS in April of 2020. She was paralyzed for 6 years from the neck down. And you said, I even forget what you said. When I found out you were severely autistic, I let it go.
Well, okay, I wouldn't say severely, but okay.
But what did you say? You said, would my dead sister laugh at something, your jokes, or no, I forget. Do you remember what you said even?
Yeah, do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, because I forget what I'm forgiving you for.
I said something like, I wish that I was your dead sister so that I didn't have to see your channel turn into a dumpster fire.
Oh, it's worse than I thought. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty bad. I mean, it's definitely poor taste and judgment.
Right. And I mean, it's not like I didn't know that. I did that intentionally. But I mean, there are some things that I think I need sort of training and practice to know that it's past the line. And I kind of wanted to ask you about that actually. What is a good way to know what things are okay to be offended about and what things aren't okay to be offended about?
Yeah, before I answer your question, I got to ask you one, what have I hurt you in the past, or what motivated you? Because you admitted you tried to hurt me there.
Yeah, I think part of it is I guess one way to say it would be that it seems like you don't care about offending other people.
Okay. So you were trying to prove a point that there is a line that one can cross to hurt people and you shouldn't cross it.
Yeah, maybe something to do with that. I don't know that I really thought about it that much.
Yeah, and Navigate with Nate is making a comment live stream similar to what we're talking about now, which is kind of bothersome to me, because Navigate with Nate is a smart guy, and I thought he would be smart in that, because I've never said that I'm... Let me put it this way. Anybody who takes me seriously that I am completely dead inside is an idiot. I've said many times that I am not completely dead inside. I even joke that, which is not really a joke, and maybe that's a problem because people don't know when I'm joking, when I'm not joking, but there's always an element of truth in the things I'm trying to put put across, that we should attempt to be more dead inside when we're talking about things, when we're debating, because once we get emotional, it tends to skew our objectivity. But of course, people get offended on things. Of course, I get offended on things because I am human, unfortunately. And so where's that line for me? Yeah, I think once you start talking about dead relatives, dead family members in a negative way, I think for most people that's crossing the line. Now, if you were to
that's
mock
a
me
more
for
obvious one, right? But I'm talking about like maybe less obvious cases. How do you know?
it's different for every person. But I think the obvious ones are for most people the same. Like if you were to tease me for having no hair, like who cares? If you were to tease me for, I don't know, for being old or whatever, who cares? But I think the goal would be, though, that no matter what it is, we can become stronger. Even though you repeated exactly what you said the first time, guess what? It didn't affect me at all the second time. I'm being honest with you. There was nothing inside my emotions the second time that triggered me. And so, and this is the solution to being triggered, is you become more numb to it. Well, and the fact that you apologize for it is probably why I wasn't triggered as well, but that you acknowledge that that's a crappy thing to say.
Well, at first I actually thought about apologizing and then doing kind of like a switcheroo where I actually apologized about bringing up body armor. But then I decided to be more sincere about it.
Well, yeah, that was a weird thing you said right after. For those of you who don't know, right after you said that thing about my sister, you asked me if I had body armor or something.
Right, and that was a thing that didn't really occur to me, that in the context it would come off like a school shooter or something. But the body armor thing is something I say a lot just because I think it's like novel and funny.
Yeah. But when you mentioned someone close to me who's died, and then in the next sentence you mentioned body armor, like implying that I'm going to die next. Yeah, that's.
But like you could ask Arthur from Apologia Center. Like the first time I talked to him, I'm pretty sure I said the exact same thing. So it's not like just some. I didn't mean it as like a threat.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I actually, even before you came on today and asked for forgiveness, I think in my mind I forgave you a long time ago. Like I think we even had an interaction on somebody else's channel in the live stream chat that I think you're unblocked, right? Yeah, I unblocked you. And
I don't know. I haven't checked.
Yeah.
I mean, I was using a different account anyways and still in your live chat, to be honest. So.
Okay. But anyhow, I forgive you.
Okay.
Yeah, I would really caution that once you start talking about life and death, you got to be a little careful what you say.
But so I guess another question I have real quick though is like, when you're telling.
Here we go.
Like trans people.
I knew you were going there.
When you're telling them like to not be offended or to be more dead inside, is that just like another way of saying like don't care about things that I don't care about? Like from your point of view?
It depends what it is. Like for the pronouns, I think that's definitely true. Because like words in themselves doesn't cause, I think, the problem. Like calling a man who's a trans woman, it's what those words mean, right? And I just did a video on this, but I think I have said in the past that if I had evidence that if I said the word red dog, and every time I said the word red dog, 10 people commit suicide. Yeah, I think at that point, I have a responsibility to not say red dog. But I'm also on record saying that there's a difference between suicide ideation and actually committing suicide. And very few trans people actually commit suicide. And this is like one of the big myths about the trans activist movement, that trans people are committing suicide in droves. That's simply not true. There's no evidence of that. And there's especially no evidence that they're committing suicide for being trans. Oftentimes they're in the sex trade industry, or there's other reason why, or their parents have kicked them out of the house. It's the fact that they are on the streets. I mean, those are the main reasons.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. I didn't really want to get into that like data type stuff or whatever. I'm more interested in like how you think about where those lines are, or I don't know. I guess sometimes it seems like an oversimplification when you're saying like just be dead inside, or that type of stuff. That
Why do you think that bothers? Do you think it bothers people when I say that?
Well, okay, let me finish this thought first, please, because basically what I was trying to say is that it seems like that's not really what you mean, because it's sort of like more complicated. Whenever you actually explain what you mean by be more dead inside, it's way more nuanced than what the actual phrasing that you use.
Ding, ding, ding. You got it.
Portrays. So is it just like trying to use some rhetoric to like rile people up? Is that all it is? Or?
Well, I do enjoy riling people up, but it's deeper than that, though. When people hear me say, be more dead inside, and that's all they hear, and then they start to question, then they might start thinking like, okay, what does he really mean? And then, I've had so many videos where I do give a more nuanced answer, and they go, oh, okay, well, I can see in some situations that's definitely true. Like, we do want to be more objective.
Don't you feel like that kind of backfires in a lot of cases?
Yeah.
Or do you not really care about that?
I oftentimes use the backfire effect to my advantage. So I will purposely cause people to have a knee-jerk reaction and have it backfire, because I learned many years ago that when someone hears me say something and then I'll even use the word hates me for saying it, I know through experience that they will hear eventually at some point in their life, because of the YouTube algorithms or whatever, they will come back and say, what's Doug up to now? And they'll hear me say something that they agree with. And that is what causes the cognitive dissonance. When they go from hating me to saying, I actually agree with what Doug said here. And then they go backwards in time and say, well, okay, well, wait a minute. If I agree with Doug here, what happened back there? And then they start rethinking it. It's like when I say trans women are not real women. There are going to be people who will hear me say that for the first time today, just now, and they will now think horrible thoughts about me. But then there's going to be people who say, well, wait a minute. What does Doug mean by real women? If he means biological women, then I agree with him. Trans women are not biological females. But I said it
and I think most trans people would agree with that too.
Yeah, most trans people.
They don't have it in their head that they switch like their biological sex.
So by using these, what you called rhetoric, and it is rhetoric, by using specific rhetoric like this, it actually forces people who actually have some type of integrity or curiosity of what people mean with the words they say. It forces them to become more like a street epistemologist and ask good questions like, well, what do you mean by that? And if what you mean by that is, trans women are not biological males, I agree. Trans women are not real women. And then they have to ask the question, well, why is it even bad to phrase it that way? And then it opens up the doors for another interesting conversation like, well, it makes people feel bad to be called not a real woman.
Yeah, I think my question would be something more like, why is like a biological conceptualization the only way that is valid to consider real?
It isn't.
Well, by your standards,
It
it
is.
seems like it.
Yeah, that's my definition.
Right.
But someone else can have a different definition that I disagree with.
Mhm.
But I do think my definition is better, and I can give reasons for it. Like when it comes to public policy, my definition actually leads to less harm.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, I'm not going to debate
and again,
stuff like
for
that,
all those
but-
people who say, Doug, why do you keep talking about trans stuff? I didn't bring it up. You did. And I'm responding to it.
I know.
Okay.
Also, one other thing that I think is a little bit interesting too is that I think like a lot of the people that agree with your positions are not very dead inside either. And so if you go back and look at like the live chat, whenever I said that about your sister the first time,
Mm-hmm.
man, a lot of people in your live chat got very like triggered by me saying that. They were not very dead inside.
Yeah, I think I
Now,
remember that too.
maybe that is like because it's a subject that most people would agree that you shouldn't like joke about in that way or whatever. I don't know, but I don't know. A lot of people were very upset.
Yeah, I do think that is a subject that at least 90% of the population are agreed you don't go there, especially if the person has died recently. The thing is, like things like identity, I can't relate to people struggling with their identity because I just can't. I can try intellectually to understand it, but to feel that, no, I can't feel that at all.
Yeah, and that's another thing too that someone, I think Jerome had mentioned that I forgot to say the last time I talked to you with regards to like part of the reason why I think maybe some of your religious content is, I think, better quality in general than like when you talk about wokeness or, you know, political and social issues, is because that you've never actually been woke. You've never, I mean, you can't really relate to it either.
Well, under my definition of
But-
woke, I never want to be woke.
Yeah, but you never want to be a Christian again either, but that doesn't mean that you weren't a Christian. I'm just saying.
Well,
you
hang
can
on.
relate
No, if
to
Christianity is
Christians
true,
better.
if Christianity is true and miracles can happen and I get stage 4 cancer, yeah, I want to be a Christian again because then God can heal me.
Yeah, but come on. You get what I'm saying, I think, right? You have been a Christian. You can relate to the thought process, I think, a little bit better.
Well, some Christians, yes.
You agree with
You know,
that?
you're right. But like, there's still some Christians out there I just have no clue. Like, I can't empathize with
Yeah.
them. Like some
Yeah, sure.
Pentecostals and.
And I think, honestly, though, your channel has helped me understand Christians better because I never really was raised that way. I don't think I really understood them that well. And I did a lot of the like straw manning of their positions. And, you know, like I would actually think someone like Matt Dillahunty made a lot of sense, you know, not to bring up him more like everybody else does, but yeah, I think that's pretty much it, though.
Okay. Well, thanks for coming on and apologizing. And I forgive you, my son. Go in peace. May science richly bless you. In the name of
Thank you,
Dawkins, Sam Harris, and Christopher Hitchens, go in peace.
All right.
Shalom.
Have a good one.
Someone's just said that David Wood on Apostate Prophets channel said why he would never come on my channel. Can you, who said that? Alex. Was it on the most recent AP's video? Because I really want to see what his reason is. He's probably going to say I'm disingenuous or something like that. See, the last one was 2 days ago. Let's bring up the transcript. Oh, transcript's up. Let's search for Creek. Not there. Search for Doug. Doug Lindsay, but not me. Search for Pine. Not there. Let's go to 4 days ago. Transcripts up. Good. Creek. Not there. Pine. Not there. Doug. Douglas Murray. You got to help me out, Alex. Can't find it. It's River to the Sea Stream. Okay. Maybe I just email Apostate Prophet. I have his email. I have the backdoor channels. What river, what sea? Maybe that one. I actually think David Wood and I would have a great conversation. Because he's dead inside. There we go. Found it. Thanks, Gur. And Alex.
Das Buch.
Das Buch. Okay, I was right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was good. Yeah. See, you remember. Hope to see more of Momo's Boom Boom Room soon. David, I hope to see you on
Lies
PineCreek
das Buch! Lies das Buch!
It says, David, I hope to see you on PineCreek's channel someday.
Not likely.
Why? What is your problem with PineCreek, man? Do you even know? What
Don't know.
PineCreek is?
I can't tell you 2 words that he says. I just know he's the guy who used to come. Everyone who does this annoys me. It could be someone I totally agree with on everything else, but he used to just come on to every live stream I was on and just, no matter what the topic was, constantly try to divert it to something he wanted to talk about.
Oh,
No.
And
I see it.
yeah, so I can't stand. I can't stand that if it's a Christian. I can't stand if it's an atheist. I can't stand.
I don't do that.
The people who
I think what he's referring to is when I go on people's live stream chats, it's not me diverting, it's people asking me questions that have nothing to do with the live stream. And I've actually I've learned from this, and I'll say things like, let's focus on the topic at hand. But because I'm such a nice guy, when people ask me questions, I'll just very quickly answer them. So if that's what he's talking about, yeah, guilty for answering people's questions that have nothing to do with the topic at hand. Yeah, I've learned this, especially with smaller channels, and I didn't think David Wood would notice this because he has a fairly big channel. But if you're a content creator with any type of following and you go into a live stream chat and people know you, that will divert the attention away from the content creator. And so the content creators don't like that. Like even here today, I banned 1 or 2 people because they were talking about stuff that was so far removed from what I was talking about. And they just didn't do it once. They kept going and going and going. Almost like a debate within my live stream chat. If I notice it, yeah, I'll give you a timeout. And if you keep doing it, I'll ban you. And I don't mind a little bit of back and forth on some other topic, but if you're like filling up the live stream chat with a debate that's totally irrelevant, yeah, you're at risk.
who habitually just come into a discussion and constantly try to. Now, keep in mind, like lots of people here, they leave comments and they joke around and stuff. But
yeah,
if we're talking about jihad and you came in and you started going, but what? Why can you believe in the Trinity? I would be like, that's annoying, dude. Like
yeah, I bet you'll never find an example of me doing that. I wish I had us. Oh, actually, I do have the Wichita Home Office. Hey, Wichita Home Office, if you are listening right now, I want you to go through every video of David Woods, although he took his channel down, but I think he has it up somewhere else on a website. Go through every live stream chat and see if you can find my bringing up topics that like the Trinity totally out of the blue.
There are lots of Muslims who do that in every discussion. You could be talking about anything. You say this is the topic, and they'll come in there to the chat and just try to divert the discussion the entire time. I don't know. It annoys me. It doesn't annoy me.
I'm skeptical of his reasoning. I think, and I can be totally wrong with what I'm about to say, but I think the reason why David Wood wouldn't come on my channel is because I've made videos that he would view as mocking him. The one I can think of is the one where David Wood is not against mocking. So I can say this. David Wood mocked Muslims about the moon splitting in two. Like if that actually happened in history, people all over the world would have noticed. But we have no record of that happening. I agree with David Wood. Great reasoning. But then I brought up the sun standing still in the Jericho, in the book of, I forget what book it's in, Deuteronomy or something. If the sun stood still in the sky, there'd be people all around the world talking about it. And so I have a video of him going, we got to remember this was a long time ago and maybe the writings are not literal. I mean, I think this is the real reason he might not want to talk to me, because I've embarrassed him. Maybe.
Everyone annoys the crap out of me. If someone's doing it, if it looks like serious and deliberate, like I'm coming here with the sole purpose of diverting you away from the topic you're here to discuss.
I don't know. I don't think any atheist would do something like that, because that goes against atheist.
You do that.
Morality, and atheists generally don't do such things. It's also.
Oh, I get it. Incest is fine, but not changing the subject. Okay, Pete.
Of course.
Welcome to the perfectly functional.
I love Apostate Prophet's hat and that he's pretending to smoke cigars. Is that sheet music he's smoking?
Moral compasses of atheism.
These are good morals. Chloe's.
Yeah. Okay. I think if another thing came to my mind. I think part of the reason why David Wood doesn't like me is because when David Wood came out with the Apologetic Empire about 3 or 4 years ago, you guys remember that? If you're new here, you don't remember, but his goal was to have Christians retake YouTube in the field of apologetics, the field of religion, and have way more Christian content creators. And he wanted to call it the Apologetic Empire. And I made a video just mocking them about that. I made many videos mocking him about that. I mean, good times. It was fun. And I know David Wood can take it, but I think he's a little ticked. He could take it, but there's a little bit of bum hurt there. Oh, it's not sheet music, it's torn Quran pages. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, both these guys, Apostate Prophet and David Wood, they can never accuse me of mocking too much, because I've never literally eaten or pretended to eat the Quran. Although I have said a lot of bad things about Islam, at least things that Muslims would view bad. Like I've said Muhammad's just a front man for a made-up religion that took decades to make and compile, and that the choice liar, lunatic, or prophet, yeah, it's way more probable Muhammad was a liar, and he wasn't a good guy, that in today's standards, yeah, he would not be viewed as, he had slaves, he married a 9-year-old or something like that. I mean, how many fathers would want their sons to be like Muhammad, to have slaves and marry 9-year-olds when they're 30 or 40? I've said stuff like that. Have I ever drawn a picture of Allah? I might have once on video. And YouTube never took it down. So David would be a very interesting guy to interview, because I think he and I would agree with so much of the intertestimony of the Holy Spirit type feelings nonsense. I know God is real because I've experienced him. I actually think David Wood leans Calvinist. But I don't think I've ever heard him come out and say that. I do remember him being asked, what is the strongest argument for God? And I think he said the impossibility of the contrary, which is a pre-sup Calvinist thing to say. And I kind of respect Calvinists more than non-Calvinists because they own it. They just own that, hey, yeah, God creates people to go to hell for destruction. God creates evil. They own the problem of evil in the sense of, yeah, God's all loving and he says he doesn't want any to perish, but he doesn't really mean it that way. Yeah, he actually does want, he creates people to go to hell. They just own it. Yeah, God told people to kill other people in the Old Testament. So I respect it when Christians own they're crazy. David Wood ain't no Calvinist. Well, he might not admit it. In fact, I love to demonstrate other people to be wrong. I wonder if I can quickly find it where he said that. Apologetic Empire. Yeah, I think I found it already.
Question for each person, what is your favorite argument for God's existence? I'm just going to be quick. I'm not going to give an explanation of it. Mine is the argument from contingency. We'll just pass it on.
Transcendental argument for God's existence.
See, these are all Calvinist
variations
type
of the
arguments.
moral argument.
I think the moral argument would be my favorite.
Yeah, the moral argument is one of the worst ones in my opinion. If God doesn't exist, objective morality doesn't exist. Number 2, objective morality exists. Conclusion, God exists. But objective morality can only come from the nature of God. So when you change those words to objective morality to the morality that it can only come from God, it becomes, if God doesn't exist, God morality doesn't exist. Number 2, God morality exists. Conclusion, God exists. I mean, it loses all its power and all it becomes a tautology.
The moral argument.
The moral argument's the most relevant. You get most questions on the moral argument. I like the cosmological argument, though, because it gives you the most attributes of God.
Yeah, that I don't agree with.
I would make an argument on the irrationality of the contrary.
See, there it is. The irrationality, I remembered correctly. Except one different word. And this is what Calvinists say. That the only worldview that makes sense, that is possible, is the Christian worldview, because all other worldviews are impossible. They can't be. And then you ask questions like, well, do you know all worldviews? No. Well, then how can you say all of them are irrational or impossible? Now, does that make him a Calvinist? No. Does that make him sound like a Calvinist? Yes. He's basically saying Christianity or God exists because it's impossible for God not to. I mean, to me, that's not very powerful. I don't think I'll play any more of this. Well, actually, let me check something. They haven't really answered the title of the live stream. What's the biggest obstacle to belief? Let's search the word obstacle. It's not even in the transcript. Or yeah, okay, I lied. Oh no, it's in the comments. Oh, here we go.
Talking about eternal matter versus eternal consciousness, and it's like, this isn't really what I want to talk about. I want to try to navigate all these cultural obstacles to God and obstacles to the gospel. You know what I mean? But I guess the reason I'm excited to talk to you is just to kind of help see like what is a good path that we can take as Christians through these different ideas and worldviews and things, but that again doesn't just trigger like
raise the dead. That's how you do it. Amputees get their limbs back. Pray in the name of Jesus. That's how you navigate it. I know you hate that answer, but it's true. And until that day, you really got nothing. You got some philosophical arguments that conjures up God through words. You got history, some books written long ago that most people don't care about, don't value like the Word of God like you do. So you can't really use that. You got to use something today. Okay, call in if you're going to call in, Christians. I know there's Christians here. How do I know? Because I'm going to make a poll and ask. I am a... Oh, now you're going to show me to be a liar. I mean, incorrect, not a liar, incorrect. Okay, poll is up. I am a Christian or B, not a Christian. This is a true dichotomy. But there's going to be some idiot young person saying, false dichotomy. Fart Panther, you talked to me yesterday. You've been really active in my comment section the last 24 hours, and now you want me to watch a video on gender. You think I'm missing some knowledge? You don't think I understand that many people view gender as a social construct? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised that the video you have in mind I've already played and you don't not even realize it. See, I was right. We got Christians here. Because Christians never lie. And when they answered this poll, 12%, there's 266 people here. We have at least 27, 28, 29 Christians in here. Now, for the Christians listening, the Holy Spirit is real, and it's prodding you to call in. It's convicting you to call in. Don't click off. Be a servant of the Lord and call in. But Doug, I'm not very articulate. I mean, I'm not very smart. Think of Moses. Moses wasn't articulate. Moses wasn't smart. He was just a farm boy from Egypt. No, he wasn't a farm boy. Thanks, JR. You're right. I should have said I am and then a Christian and not a Christian. Yeah, I put the "a" in the wrong spot. So sue me. What musical is that from? Sue me, sue me. Do, 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 do. So the way you call in, you 28 Christians, is you press the link at the top. But JR, I do have good grammar. My mom learned me really good. So if you have a problem with my grammar, You talk to my grandma and mother. Nobody's learned me grammar as good as my grandma and mother. Do I say Happy Holidays or Merry Christmas? I say Merry Christmas. Unless it's completely obvious to me that I'm talking to a Jew, then I'll say something like, Jesus is not the Messiah. Have a great day. And they say, Shalom, you a good guy. I'm actually on the Christian side of things when like I would love to trigger atheists and secularists, look them in the eye and say Merry Christmas. I bet you even Jews are not offended if they hear Merry Christmas. Is there any Jews here? Do I run that poll? Oh, this is so much fun. I'm going to do this for you, Jerome. I am a Jew, not a Jew. Oh, wow. We got more Jews in here than Christians, maybe? No. I know there's at least one Jew in here because I saw him type. By the way, have I ever told you guys I love the Jews? I can hardly wait till Reed edits my conversation with the Israeli defense fighter soldier. %, 4%, 6%. Is Jew a culture? Is it a race? Both? Doug, do you know who Sam Shimon is? Yes, I do. Would you debate him? He's welcome to come on right now. I gotta say this because it's come up. I get emails from people saying I want to talk to you, but I can't come on Thursday. I do this for a hobby. People think I do this for the money. If anybody who thinks I do this for the money, they're stupid with 2 O's. In fact, you know what? Okay, we got 5% Jews. That's 25. We got at least 10 Jews in here. Excellent. And I bet you all 10 of them are atheists. I want to show you guys how much money I make from this channel. Full disclosure. Can I do this without giving out vital information? I think so. In fact, I got paid yesterday from Google. I gotta be very careful how I do this. I can do it 2 ways. I can use YouTube Analytics, or I can actually show you what was transferred in my bank account, which is the real deal. No, there's no way I'm going to risk showing my bank account. That would be a stupid thing with 2 O's to do. So let me bring up YouTube Analytics. Although if I did show you my bank account, you'd be convinced that I'm not doing it for the money. I think. Okay, yeah, this is safe. I can show this. I still get people commenting I do things for the views, for the clicks, blah, 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 blah. Last month, last 28 days, my revenue is now $404.29. If you actually think that that makes any difference in my life, you're stupid with two O's. Let me see how much money I made since I started my channel. Okay, I've been doing my channel since October 2016. I've made 50 grand in 7 years. Now, 50 grand sounds like a lot of money, but it's over 7 years. Is that right? 7 years? When did I start the channel? If you go to socialblade.com, you type in PineCreek Doug, you can get a lot of free stats. When did I start my channel? August 29th, 2016. So 7 years and 3 months or so. So 50 divided by 7 is 7,000 a year on average. Like, don't get me wrong, 7,000 a year is good money, pays for my utilities, like the internet bill, pays for my cloning, voice cloning, my XSplit subscription. It pays my expenses and then a little bit extra. But if you think that little bit of extra, no, that's not why I do this. Oh, and the reason why I got on this topic in the first place is because people asked me to talk to them outside of Thursday. I mean, I do not want YouTube to become my God, where, oh, I gotta do this at this time because, no, I don't like to. If I'm going to schedule anything, it's going to be for my real job or real family and friends. Like, Reed had to beg me to come to Phoenix on Monday, and I'm glad I did, but like, that's very, I wouldn't do that for most people. I do it for Reed, because Reed's better than you guys. No, I just know him. I mean, we've known each other for a long, long time. How much does your boss in Wichita paying you? Does well, he just does me favors. Nate. Okay, now let me poll you guys. There's some of you who are smart, so you'll, but now that you know my earnings, was it more than you thought? Less than you thought? About what you thought? Okay, answer that poll question. People who have watched my channel for a long time know that I've talked about this before. So if you're a long-time subscriber, you're going to answer about what you thought, because I've basically told you. This is interesting. About half of you understand YouTube. So I'm really happy for the 20% here in the middle. Because if you think like I'm talking about the trans issue for clicks and stuff. My subscribers have gone, well, it hasn't grown as much as it did in the past because of that. Like 60% of atheists or 65% of atheists are leaning left. A lot of that, probably another third of that, 66% are woke atheists, and they just hate me for talking about this issue. So if I'm doing this for the money and the clicks and the views, I would avoid those topics. Unless, at least as an atheist, like if I became a Christian and wanted to become like the Daily Wire or whatever, yeah, that's different. But in my space, I still attract more atheists than theists, right? So I'm purposely causing some atheists to leave. And they're not being replaced by Christians, because Christians, Muslims, they have reason to dislike me. Atheists have reasons to woke atheists have reasons to dislike me. It's interesting that 28% of you thought I it's more than that you thought. You thought I made less? Interesting. Well, I still get, where is it? Oh, yeah. See, look at this. It's like clockwork. Oh, no, it went up. Never mind. I thought my subs went down, but they went up. Here's my subs for the last 28 days. So back here, I might say something like trans women are not real women. Then it goes down a little bit. And then I talk about God's not real or whatever, and it goes back up. Then it plateaus. I think maybe this has gone up because people like the sincerity of me hugging Frank Turk. I don't know. And I've given people faith in humanity that people can disagree, but it's really hard to explain these things. But if I go lifetime, what happened? Let's see what oh yeah. So this is lifetime. My best video is Why I No Longer Go to Church, Joel Osteen. 329,000 views. Oh yeah, see, this is why David Wood doesn't like me. Instant oops, David Wood and Bart Ehrman. 115,000 views. Stephen Furtick. Oh, this is an old one. James White. Tim Keller, he's dead now, I think. But most of my most popular videos are really old. Where does it say how much money I actually made on this one? Here we go. Oh yeah, look at this. I made $1,243 on that Joel Osteen video. That's not bad. But like a guy like Apostate Prophet, I bet you he makes that on every video. Because his views are so much higher. In fact, let's see how much Apostate Prophet makes. Sorry, Apostate Prophet, but I'm going to expose you for being a grifter. Apostate Prophet makes on ad revenue 200,000 a year on the top end. Now, usually the top end is like, for me, the top end is right. Like, okay, what does it say for me? It says 4,000 a year. That's a little low, actually. Hang on. Yeah, I make more than that. So for me, it's too low. But I think with Apostate Prophet, it's either right or maybe even too high because of his controversial stuff. Apostate Prophet. So I would say ad revenue wise, Apostate Prophet's making at least 150,000 a year. And then, but he has Patreon, right? Support as well. So it would not surprise me if he makes $250,000 a year. Let's see what Apologia makes. $31,000 a year in ad revenue. And he makes at least that in Patreon support. I would guess Apologia makes at best 75,000 a year. That's US. So what is that? $1 million in Canadian dollars? No, I'm kidding. It's a little surprising. I thought Apologia would make more money than that. He definitely works hard on his videos. He deserves more money than that. Like if I make 7,000 a year and he makes 70,000 a year, he works more than 10 times hard. Like he definitely puts in more than 10 times what I put in. Like I think I heard him say that for every minute, he spends 1 hour. Whereas for every minute, I spend 1 minute. Like this is my minute right here. Myth Vision. Okay, I'll look up Myth Vision. Oh, I should look up Trent Horn, the Council of Trent. Hang on, what's it called? Myth Vision Podcast. Yeah, here it is. Oh, he's doing well. This is probably accurate, 108. And he probably makes, what, another 30 to 50,000 Patreon support? Let's look up Council of Trent. Sorry, Trent Horn. 33,000 a year plus Patreon support, which could be, I don't know, another 10,000, 20. That's actually less than I thought. I mean, he has lots of kids. He's Catholic. He needs more money. Well, hang on. Let's see. We might have to donate to Trent Horn. Let's see if he has Patreon. And we got to donate to Magnum PI too. Actually, Magnum PI. Oh, yeah, we got to do Daily Dose of Wisdom next. The guy with the mustache. I bet you he makes way more than Trent Horn. Okay, yeah, he does have Patreon. $5 a month, $10 a month, $25 a month. Does it say how many Patreon supporters he has? No. Okay. Let's look up Daily Dose of Wisdom. I predict he makes more than Trent Horn. And it's just because of the mustache. Which means I got to grow my mustache back. Daily Dose of Wisdom. Daily _ dose _ of. Here he is. Whoa. Oh. Oh. Oh, that hurts. Like Trent Horn feels my pain now too. Because me and Trent are way smarter than Magnum PI here. And he makes $413,000 a year because of the stash. Okay, something's wrong with the world. It's okay. It's okay, Adolf. I know you don't like the word stash because you think people are mocking your Hitler. Okay. Let's see his views here.
My guest on the podcast today is
popular videos. Like, yeah, he has videos with 5.3 million views. Yeah. Look at this. Let me show it. $16s, $36. Those are not big. But this is 309,000 views. And all he's doing is playing clips of other people. He's doing what I'm doing. Yeah. He doesn't get a lot of views when he's talking about atheists. He just shows, I guess, theists dunking on atheists. 800,000 views. Even Jordan Peterson didn't get a lot of views. Seems like he is appealing to the older Christian crowd because the John Lennox ones get big views. Yeah, John Lennox. 900,000 views. Frank Turek. Interesting. Yeah, all the John Lennox ones get the big views. And John Lennox is repulsive to me. Oh, and this guy. So he's appealing to the older crowd who thinks evolution is false. Like even Joe Rogan gets less views than John Lennox. God is not a theory, he is a person. 5.3 million views 4 months ago. Wow. Frank Turek gets 2.1. Dawkins 39,000. Even Prager doesn't get very many. It's probably because he's a Jew. Racist. No respect. Okay, that was fun. How's Lakeland Church Osteen? Oh, Osteen's kicking butt, I'm sure. Osteen has a great model. I mean, give people hope, meaning, and purpose. Make them feel good. That's what people want. If you actually converted to moral, which apologetic shows would you hit to maximize conversion profits? Well, that's obvious answer. Like Frank Turek, like him and I are best buds now, right? I mean, like if I really think about it, when I saw Frank Turek the other day, and he gave me that hug, I felt something I haven't felt in a long time. I felt loved and accepted for my intrinsic value. I mean, you can talk about philosophical arguments and the historical evidence, but all Christians need to do with me is give me the love that I'm crying out for. Like this. Here it is. Love in real time. Like, look at that smile. You can't fake that. You atheists can't give me that type of love. Okay, we got someone calling in. That was sarcasm, everyone. It's okay. I'm fine. Hi, Babis.
Hey. What's
Hi.
up?
I said hi, Babis.
Hi, how are you?
I know you're one of my favorite guests now because you love me with,
Why?
with Christian love. And what do you want to talk about?
Okay, thank you. So I was thinking about Job, but if you have any other limiting belief that you, because that's the title of your live stream, so if you have anything else in mind, you can say that.
Yeah, your accent's destroying our communication.
Yes.
I have no idea what you said. Is your translator here?
Okay. So I was thinking about Job. You know Job from the Old Testament. But if you have anything else in mind,
Job.
Yes, but if you have anything else in mind, you can talk about that.
Oh no, we can talk about Job. I like Job. I mean, that story is straight out of the movies.
So, should I make my case?
What's the case you're going to make first?
So I will try to show you how God isn't someone who plays with our destinies for no reason.
Okay. So I'll translate for people who can't understand you. I'm not trying to be offensive, but your accent is
okay.
pretty
No problem. No problem.
Okay, so what Babis is saying here is he's going to explain why Yahweh in the book of Job is not a schmuck. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we know that we allow evil in our lives, and God. And we know also that rain falls to believers and to the unbelievers. So that means that bad things can happen to anyone. And it doesn't mean that just because something good happens in your life, it's God rewarding you, or that something bad is that God is punishing you. So actually, we live a life, and we have this life to learn from bad things.
Wait a minute. Are you saying that when I win in poker, it's not because God's blessing me?
Correct.
Okay.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. That's what I'm saying. And so Satan wanting to do harm to us isn't something new. What it actually shows is that anything can be in God's plan, even something that even if He allows some beings to do evil, it actually is to support His plan in the end.
Can I interrupt here?
Okay.
You used two phrases which I think are contradictory. At least they put tension on each other. The first phrase you said was that God's plan.
Yes.
And then the second phrase you said was God allows.
Yes. So God's plan is God's plan doesn't mean He forces us to do something.
Can God's plans be thwarted?
What does that mean?
That means stopped, prevented.
No, what actually happens is that we can choose to not follow the path that God has for us.
So God's plans can be stopped.
No, God's plan doesn't mean that He forces us to do something. We have free will.
I know. But if God plans to, let's say, buy a Tesla tomorrow, can that plan for God to buy a Tesla be stopped?
If you are Christian, no. if you decide to move away from God, then it can be you can choose to not happen. You can choose it to not happen.
I don't think we're communicating, because if God has a goal, if he has a plan, can any human or any being in the universe stop that plan?
If he has a plan for you and you choose to distance yourself from God, then you yourself
So
can
all you have to do
destroy
is
that
say
plan.
yes.
Quote unquote.
So
Quote unquote, destroy, yes.
So the answer is yes.
I wouldn't
it
use the
can
word
be.
destroy. I wouldn't use the word destroy. I would use the word not follow it. Because actually the ultimate plan of God is not destroyed. It's actually a plan for you, for your life.
Are there any? So your answer was yes. God's plans can be stopped. Is there any plans of God
By
that
us.
cannot be stopped?
Yes. So those plans are the ones that we learn in, for example, the prophecies in Revelation. And let me explain. When a plan is something about, when a plan is a little general, this doesn't mean that it talks about personal, about where a person will be in that plan. So you can be either on God's side or you can be on the devil's side.
Okay, let's get back to Job.
But the general plan will be will happen, and it cannot be stopped.
Let's get back to Job. I'm going to ask you: can God see the future?
Yes.
Does Satan know that God can see the future?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think Satan believes God when God says something?
Yes, actually, Satan believes in God more than we do.
Okay, so if Satan said, "Hey, God, Job will leave you; he will forsake you if you take away all his blessings," and God replies, "No, he won't," shouldn't Satan just say, "Oh, okay"?
Do you mean to imply predestination?
No, I'm saying that if Satan believes God, then there was no need for Job to be tortured.
So you are trying to rationalize the evil and the hatred that Satan and the other fallen angels have.
No, what I'm saying is what God did was a complete waste of time, because all God had to do is tell Satan, I know the future. And Satan said, yeah, of course you do. You're God. Because as you said, Satan believes in God more than humans do, because he knows God better. And so Satan all would say, okay, if we take everything away from Job, Job's going to curse you. And all God had to do is say, hey, Satan, I see the future. If you try this, it's not going to work. So let's not even try.
So what actually happens is that I wouldn't say that this only happened then, because they will do till they go to hell. So in the end times. So
why are you talking about end times?
They are allowed. They have the free will. They have the free will to do us some harm or to bring us a temptation. So
this has nothing to do with what I just said.
Because rain will fall to believers and the unbelievers. It doesn't actually talking about God didn't allow Satan so that he will prove Satan wrong. God had other plans. It doesn't matter what Satan thinks. Anyway.
So what was God's plan with Job?
So I don't know. I'm not in the mind of God, but what is a very valuable lesson from the book of Job is shows Job in a vision many animals in the land and fish of the sea and many planets and huge beasts, and shows that he controls everything. So he knows what he does, and we cannot say that God does something wrongly.
Okay. Thanks for calling in.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Next time we really got to get his translator in here so we can speak in his native tongue freely. The story of Job is about Satan tempting Yahweh, Yahweh falling for it. It was a bet. Job being tortured, his family dying, animals dying, friends dying. And then at the end, Job still being faithful to God, which God already knew would happen. And Satan, if Babbis is right, Satan would have known that would have happened because he believes God. Now he's the deceiver, Satan's the deceiver, but the deceiver knows that God's the truth teller. I mean, it was the only answer I think a Christian can give, the only good answer a Christian can give is Job didn't know. But then again, Job, if he really trusts God, could just say, hey God, if you were to take away all my blessings, would I still love you? And God would say, yeah. Okay. Then I guess you don't actually have to do it to test it. Yeah, I could have used Google Translate. Babbis, people want to know what you are. Are you Spanish? I think you told me, but I forget. Are you East Indian? Are you Mennonite? We got another caller. Jeff.
Hey, Doug.
Hi.
That last caller about Job, kind of interesting. I find the story of Job it hits differently to non-believers. Because to believers, it's all about like you should never lose faith no matter what you're going through. But to us, it's kind of like God isn't doing those things to you. If something bad happens, then that's God allowing Satan to do those things to you to prove a point. Like God seems so insecure.
Yeah. Well,
I think the most powerful being in the universe wouldn't have anything to prove to anybody. But
I think there's a lot of scriptures that just come out and say God does do bad things to people on purpose. And Christians need to accept that.
Yeah, it's interesting how God is portrayed as just so human in scriptures when it's, you'd think that he would be above all that, above jealousy, above everything else. But
I think what Babbis doesn't understand is that in the Old Testament, God doesn't see the future. That God is like the open theist God, like Thor. He's not omniscient. Babbis would never agree to this, but I think the ancients thought God actually had to run the experiment to see for himself. Would Job remain faithful to him or not? He didn't know the result. He had to find out. There's a lot of open theists who might be listening right now. They can testify to what I'm saying is true. This is what they believe.
interesting.
Yep.
Well, that's all I had to talk about. Just giving my opinion.
What part of Canada are you in right now?
Victoria, BC.
Oh, okay. I realized you're Canadian without asking.
It's the flannel, isn't it?
No, it wasn't the flannel. It was like Shannon Q, her abouts, and yours wasn't that bad.
About, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've born in Southern Ontario and then lived in Winnipeg for a while. So.
Oh, Winnipeg! I hate that city.
That's why I moved to Victoria, because it's December and there's like no snow. It's great.
Yeah.
Love it here.
Yeah, you're in the.
I mean, it's terrible here. Nobody should move here. Property values are insane.
Yeah, well, that's true. Victoria is the Los Angeles or San Francisco of Canada, right?
It's a lot less human duty in the streets than San Francisco, from what I've heard.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, the socialists in Canada actually clean up the feces on the streets as opposed to the San Francisco socialists.
Yeah, yeah, they do. Well, anyways, I better get back to work. Good chatting with you.
Okay, see you, Jeff.
Bye.
And sorry for all the noise. Okay, nobody else call in. Let's close that window. Am I a Jets fan? Yeah, I like the Jets. I haven't been keeping up with hockey yet this season. Still too early. Babis and Paul, be nice to each other in live stream chat. You're both children of evolution. How probable is that you give me $10 Canadian? Merry Christmas to you too. Yeah, I probably, I'm actually going back to Canada for Christmas. I'll have a white Christmas, so I won't be streaming for a while. Probably won't be streaming for the next 2 weeks. I might stream again before we leave. We'll see. The logical problem of body armor, yeah. You know what Christmas celebrates, right, Doug? Yeah, Christmas celebrates the birth of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. That's just science. Poof. My apologies to Trent Horn. He was scheduled to come on and talk about this video that we went over today, but we ran out of time.